who is head of agency and client partnerships at DIRECTV, and probably one of the best dressed men here up on stage today, representing the brand, Jonathan Mildenhall, who is the CMO of Rocket Mortgage. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I have the pleasure of talking to you today.
Mutual.
And I am excited about it. So I have to say, during our prep, we had one conversation, and Jonathan said to me, yeah, don't read me the questions. I'm ready to roll. Like, you just ask me whatever you want. So I'm here to ask him whatever we want.
I'd like to ask the people who are standing in the back to come and sit forward, please.
Yes.
If you could come and sit forward, that would really, really help us feel that we weren't actually just having an intimate conversation with...
Yeah, unless we just want to talk.
I mean, I don't mind having an intimate conversation.
This sounds good.
But I would rather the people at the back come and join us.
Yeah, come on in, everybody. It's going to be a great conversation. We'll give them 5 seconds.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here we go. Let's get started. So, Jonathan, you have held some esteemed titles and some esteemed companies. And, you know, from Coca-Cola to Airbnb, now to Rocket, it is just a phenomenal career. And it's a journey, right? And that journey has highs and lows. That journey is, you know, very different in the brands and the verticals that you worked at. Just to get to know each other and the crowd to get to know us, can you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, so I was very, very lucky in 2006 to get my first ever marketing job, and that was at Coca-Cola. It was phenomenal because I'd never been a marketer, and then to be part of the leadership team that presided over a $5 billion marketing budget on a global basis was really, really intimidating. And to be honest, I spent my time at Coke making it up. I really didn't know what I was doing. But I surrounded myself with people that were so much smarter than I and so much more creative. And in 2013, we became Creative Marketer of the Year here at Cannes. So that was a really, really good testament to the collective ability of a massive team. But then shortly after that, Brian Chesky, the chief exec of Airbnb, approached me, and I became Airbnb's first ever CMO. And I was also I was the first time CMO, and I spent all of my time making it up.
Yep.
It was brilliant experience. But I remember going home after the first week at Airbnb, and I called my husband and I said, "I'm just making it up. I'm so out of my depth. I'm just making it up." But then my husband said, "Brian Chesky is making it up too. He's never been a CEO before. Head of HR is making it up. They've never been CEO before. Everybody at Airbnb, because it was a small startup, is making it up." And we were able together to build the world's most valuable travel brand. And when Airbnb IPO'd, it IPO'd at a valuation of $100 billion. And enjoyed a greater market cap than the 2 biggest hotel chains. And then after that, the chief strategy officer at Chiat Day, LA, who was really the brain on the outside of Airbnb, and I was the kind of orchestrator on the inside of Airbnb. We set up 21st Century Brand, and now I am chief marketing officer of Rocket Companies, and so I get to lead the Rocket brand and influence brands like Shinola and StockX and Cleveland Cavaliers.
I love StockX right here.
They're nice.
Just
actually.
purchased.
They're really, really cool.
Thank you so much. No lie either. So just to riff on that a little bit, your first 2 versions of Coca-Cola and Airbnb was, I'm going to use your words, made it up, right? And then you come into an established company like Rocket, and you have to pave your own way. That's why they brought you on, because of the innovation you've brought, right? So what's the difference in joining a company like Airbnb and Rocket, where they bring you in for change, they bring you in for your mind, they bring you in for your past and what you've achieved, but then on the other end of it, it's established company in a very different vertical than what was made up in an IPO'd company. What's that like?
So as part of my own due diligence before accepting this job, I wanted to be really clear with the chief exec and the founder that I would be able to dismantle the brand and rebuild it in a way that I believe the brand and the business deserves. And this is the first time in my career when I'm actually not making it up. I feel incredibly confident about the work that is ahead. Now, I have to learn a completely different industry. This is the first time that I've worked in finance. Finance is incredibly regulated, but candidly speaking, I see a lot of brands that use regulation as an excuse to abdicate brilliant creativity. And I'm working with the lawyers inside of Rocket to break down the barriers that have historically got in the way of brilliant storytelling, brilliant community engagement. And I am hoping, genuinely hoping, that with the work that our creative partner, Miramar, are developing, that it's can-worthy. And I am hoping that this time next year, people will look at the financial sector and think that it's got as much creative opportunity as, say, the sports sector with brands like Nike and Adidas.
I love that. I mean, this is a new sector for the business that you're in. We talk about Rocket, we talk about, you think, there's obviously sub-brands like I just referenced, but you talk about home ownership, right? You talk about like the process of home ownership, the American dream, and how the interest rates right now are really changing that. And we talked a little bit about this, and I'd love for you, if it's okay, to riff on what's changed. What is like the head of household? How has that changed? How is like the individual who's making those decisions, how is that changing? And what sectors of the business are you really leaning into that may be against the norm of that?
For the past 200 years, mortgages and financing of homes and indeed all real estate has been driven by the male head of household, which in America is the white male head of household. But when you look at the category over the next 5 years, in terms of first-time home buying, the biggest communities that are driving the growth are actually black and brown communities. So it's African American and Hispanic communities that are driving most of the growth. And what's really, really interesting is when you look at African American families and Hispanic families, it is not the male head of household that makes the financial decisions. It is the female head of household. And the female head of household, she consults with her peer group, other women in her peer group. So she'll have conversations with grandma, she'll have conversations with mom, conversations with sisters, conversations on her own social media platforms. And then she gathers all of that data, and then she makes the recommendations to the male head of household. And woe betide the male head of household that's going to stand up against his African-American female partner or the Hispanic female partner. They all just say, okay. And so I have to make sure that the Rocket brand really, really changes its aperture in terms of who it appeals to. And that means that every expression of the Rocket brand, this is temporary. The core creative idea around Rocket that's in development, which we will break at the end of this year, will be a long-term core creative idea. And my mandate is to make sure that Rocket feels utterly inclusive, gender neutral, sometimes gender feminine, and really leans into the community of real estate agents and brokers, but specifically starts to appeal to those black and brown communities.
It's so interesting because as you do this seismic shift from what is a legacy company to the fastest, to your point, one of the fastest growing, genres that is the head of household now, making these decisions, that obviously has creative implications like you're talking about. And from creative implications, to get to the right person at the right time, then you're talking about results, targeting, data, analytics, outcomes, accountability, which I know you're very big on accountability, right? So, here at DIRECTV advertising, that's something we pride ourselves on as well. And we talked a little bit about that. But, I want to quote you here. You said in our pre-call that data is to inspire, not to drive, but accountability is of the utmost importance, and outcomes are the most important. So can you maybe just speak a little bit to that on how the art and the science come together in your mind with data and analytics and accountability, but also the creative?
So I've got two very fixed point of views on data. When you're developing the creative content and the narrative for the brand, you should use data as an inspirational jumping off point. But when you're placing media and spending the media dollars, I actually do want to be driven by data. And that's what's really, really interesting about DIRECTV, because you can truly help me appreciate the impact, particularly in these new communities, the impact that a brand like Rocket is having. Now, we will always, historically, we've shown up like a beer brand. And that's why we over-index on middle-aged white guys. You know, you look at our Super Bowl legacy, you know, we get high-profile celebrities who, candidly speaking, tell bad jokes. We entertain America for a weekend. Well, we always win People's Choice for that weekend. But then the following weekend, they forget us. Yeah. And I want a much more longer-term relationship. I want creative work that drives a cultural conversation. I want creative ideas and media partners that can help make sure that the conversation about Rocket continues after I've stopped spending the media dollars. So I look at partners like you, and I value the data and the targeting and the insight that you can bring. And I look at other partners where I go, right, okay, this is what the data says. Now, where's your creativity? Because I need you to use that as inspiration. I don't just want to be driven by it.
Yeah, it's so important what you said. I mean, we find ourselves in this like conundrum right now where there's so much data and there's so many places to put this like your inventory from a media perspective. But then you're like, but I'm trying to still tell a story, right? And that story is so important to tell, especially with your brand. I mean, when you talk about like the transformation that you're going through, when you talk about like what you're trying to achieve, data and analytics can be the foundation to it, but it can't be the story, right? And so how, if you don't mind, how do you, in your new narrative, in this new storytelling, what are you looking, without giving away too much, but how do you want to really take that to market? Are you looking at like a segmentation? Are you looking at it from like, new head of households and using the data to target and segment and get attribution on that? Or are you looking to like just morph the brand into something that's more memorable, to your point, and something that's more like, that goes to what you're trying to achieve? I think the crowd would love to hear that, because it touches on lots of things.
Yeah, my biggest challenge to the marketing community is so much of marketing, so much of advertising, so much of sponsorship is actually void of story. And I'm a father of 2 5-year-olds, and it's only in the last 5 years that I've realized that actually storytelling is the foundation of humankind. Storytelling helps little people grow into big people. Storytelling defines families. Storytelling defines countries. Storytelling defines brands. And yet there's so much bad marketing out there because people haven't put a premium on the story that they're telling. And so for me, you start storytelling by uncovering a universal truth. And that universal truth at Rocket is that home ownership is still the fundamental building block of the American dream. But because of low inventory, high prices, and high interest rates, there's lots of communities that feel that that fundamental building block is no longer relevant or accessible to them. And it's up to us, Rocket, working with Congress and having strong relationship in Washington to create policies that make home ownership not something that is just for the few, but for something that is for the many in America. And what struck me as I was doing my diligence about joining Rocket is there is no brand in American history that has tried to own the narrative of home ownership. And that, to me, is as gaping a big opportunity as when I started at Airbnb in 2014, and there was no hospitality brand that had ever tried to own the narrative of belonging. It's like, when you're staying in an Airbnb or staying even in a hotel, you want to feel that sense of belonging. And when you're in pursuit of the American dream, you want to feel that sense of home ownership. So Rocket's narrative is going to be around the universal ideology of home ownership, and it's for us to make sure that more Americans feel that home ownership is an accessible part of their future than ever before.
And we'll see that come out in the creative, or we're going to see that out in the narrative, because, I'll just say 70, 20, 10, right? So 70, 20, 10, I think is going to be very interesting to this crew right here. And it's your idea. I'm quoting you again. Can you tell everyone what 70, 20, 10 means and why that's important in getting that message out?
Yeah. So it's an investment principle that I've always believed in. 70% of my marketing dollars, and at Rocket, that's $600 million makes the 70% of my marketing budget. And that work, I need to be very, very confident is going to pay back. That is going to drive people to our digital platforms. And then I have 20%, which is $120 million, where I can kind of innovate and play around, but I've still got to be pretty sure, working with partners like you, that I'm going to get the data that suggests that it might not be an immediate payback, but it's resonating with my growth audiences. And then I have 10%, which is about $100 million, where I get to play with brand new ideas. And once we launch the core creative idea, I am going to launch this 10% play fund, $100 million, where anybody from anywhere who's got a brilliant idea can come and work with Rocket, because those 10% ideas that could be brand new, that are developed outside of process, could become tomorrow's 70%. So 70, 20, 10, and it's the 10% that are brand new ideas that could completely redefine how Rocket approaches the very basis of its media investment.
I love that, and I'll tell you, I apologize for bringing it up, because if there's publishers out here, your email is about to get flooded with information saying, I can be the 10%, or I am your 20%, or I'd love to be in your 70%, and I'm in your 10%. So it's an anonymous email. He doesn't give it to anybody.
But even with somebody like DIRECTV, for example, yeah, you're going to get a chunk of my media dollars, but I'd like you to be thinking about, right, okay, he believes that, investing with DIRECTV is part of his 70. What are we going to do in-house to make him so excited that he'll also put some of the innovation budget there as well?
Yeah, and to your point, one publisher can fit in 3 buckets based upon the ideas they have, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not a binary situation, right? So what's some advice that you give to your creative partners, your agency partners, your publisher partners, of how they should start to think in this journey that you're taking Rocket on? What should they be thinking about? What are you looking from them, in a more specific way, that you think will help excel your brand?
Well, there's a chap down here in front row, Bob. He was also part of the founding creative team at Airbnb, and he was outside the company, like Neil was outside the company. I never put Neil in a strategy box. Neil was just part of the creative ecosystem of the team for Airbnb. Bob is one of the most creative media thinkers that I've ever had the privilege of working with. And so it's not necessarily to the ecosystem of agencies and creators outside the company. My message is to CMOs, don't put your agencies in boxes. Make sure that the agencies are putting their most talented people on your business, and then break down the silos between each of the boxes. I mean, Bob helped me write some really, really, really compelling creative content at Airbnb, and Neil, who was the chief strategy officer at the creative agency, helped Bob develop some really interesting media thinking. And it was my job just to make sure that I was always in the room with people that are brighter than me, smarter than me, more creative than I, and that's how I grow. And then it was my job to just make sure that everybody was playing nicely and everybody would be fairly compensated regardless of where the idea came from.
I guess I'll go off script a little bit more, because I love our conversation, and it seems like through your journey with CPG into hospitality, now into finance, as you defined it, right? You've had a lot of advice given, and it seems like you're one that is more apt to give advice to individuals, right? And I'd love to hear, some of the advice that you've taken throughout your journey when you were making it up, when you were not making it up. What are some of those words of advice that you can tell individuals as you're building a brand that you've come across that either could be others or your own?
Well, it all starts back in 1992, and I was a closeted young account exec in an advertising agency, BBH, in London. And my boss was Cindy Gallop. And Cindy Gallop marched into my office one day, and she sat wrapping her Chanel Noir nails on the desk opposite me as I was on a client call. And I said to the client, oh, Cindy's walked into the office. She's looking very Cindy. I've got to go. And I put down the phone, and Cindy just said to me, this is back in 1992, before the internet. So there was no kind of like role models on how to be gay or anything. And she just looked at me and she went, Jonathan, you're gay, aren't you? And I was like, fuck. This is my moment of truth. And I said, yeah, I am. She said, and you live with your boyfriend, don't you? And I was like, fuck, what's she been doing? Stalking me home? And then she said, what's his name? So I said, well, he's Frank. And she wrote down on a little card to Frank and Jonathan, and she said, I'm having my 30th birthday party this weekend. Everybody who's anyone in the advertising industry is going to be there, and I expect you two to be there. And I was like, fuck, not only have I been outed, she's now going to out me in the entire industry. But what the beautiful thing is, because it is the biggest lesson that I've learned, on the Monday after the party, she pulled me into her office and she said, Jonathan, there's two things. There's one thing that brilliant brands and brilliant advertising people have in common, and that is they know their authenticity. And I can see that you've been struggling with your authenticity since you've been at BBH, and now you're out, you can be really, really, really authentic, and you can apply that authenticity to the brands that you serve. And when I see wasted careers in marketing, and I see wasted media dollars in marketing, it's because the marketers haven't been authentic to themselves, and it's because they haven't figured out a truly authentic idea or a truly authentic narrative for the brand.
I mean, since we're on the personal, yeah, please. Since we're on the personal, Jonathan, journey right now.
It's all personal.
Yeah, I know, and I can trust me. We haven't known each other long, but I feel like I know you very well. So let's go down that journey of some rapid fire questions for fun. Okay. So, how do you unwind at the end of the day?
2 kids. I have a set of twins, 5 years old, a little brown-skinned girl, a little white-skinned boy, and it's that classic cliche, Daddy! Oh my goodness, I can handle everything.
Right. What are you watching right now?
It was really disturbing. It was it was Netflix. Baby Reindeer. Baby Reindeer. Oh my goodness.
Oh.
So challenging, so disturbing, brilliant storytelling, so dark.
Yes, so dark. It's almost like you feel weird telling someone to watch it. It's so dark,
right?
Right? Yeah,
that's
exactly right. So, what's something you learned recently that inspired you? Recently.
I've started working with Dan Gilbert, who is one of America's wealthiest entrepreneurs. 2 years ago, he had a stroke, and each and every day he comes into the office in his wheelchair, and he's still leading the ecosystem of companies. And the guy's drive is greater today than it's ever been. And so it really doesn't matter what you're going through. If you love your job, you can always find energy to put into your job. And I'm inspired by Dan Gilbert each and every day.
I love it. So we have 5 minutes left, and I brought this little booklet up for you.
Right, thank you.
So here we go, everybody. I'm going to throw it up in the sky here. It is the CMO Thrive Guide. Why don't we tell everybody what this is, what it means to you, and why I'm holding it up in front of my face in front of these lovely people today.
So in 2012, I was part of the team that launched Coca-Cola's Content 2020, and we just gave it away here at Cannes because we thought if Coca-Cola can elevate the creative confidence of the advertising industry, then that's a good gift to give the industry. And then when my co-founder for 21st Century Brand and I launched 21st Century Brand, we wrote this white paper called The Business Case for Building an Iconic Brand. And again, we gave that away because particularly in Silicon Valley, there is this debate as to whether or not just building a great product is all you need to do, or do you need to build a great product and a great brand? And so the white paper, The Business Case for Building a Great Brand, was another act of generosity that my co-founder, Neil Barry, and I gave to the industry. And then about 14 months ago, Neil and I were talking about just how under siege it felt that most CMOs were today. Because, you know, there's so many dynamic forces that impact how a CMO actually stands tall in front of their executive leadership team, their board, their agencies, their customers, their community. And we observed that there was actually a decreasing of confidence with various CMOs. And that's actually reflected in the fact that, you know, once again, the CMO is the shortest tenured position in the C-suite. And so we decided that we'd pull together arguably 24 of the world's most influential CMOs and a number of the world's most influential CFOs and a couple of CEOs. And we believe that we've written the definitive guide to help a CMO be successful in their first 365 days. And I'm very, very proud, and we're launching it here in Cannes. And any CMO, newly minted CMO that wants a copy of it, then we're more than happy to gift it. And it's just another act of generosity in a number of initiatives that we've done over the years.
It's so great. Where can people find this?
So I've got a bag full of them.
Yeah.
and you can also download it online. And if you follow 21st Century Brand on LinkedIn, you can download a digital copy from that. Or Neil Barry on LinkedIn, download a digital copy, or myself.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up.
For a wonderful conversation. Thank you for a wonderful time here in Cannes. I hope everyone had a great time listening to Jonathan. Was he not amazing?
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for giving us your time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brand Innovators.
Cheers.